Yes. Hello, and welcome to our 25th Tuesday Tales of Terror. Oh my goodness. Oh, excuse me while I let in my familiar. Come in. I'm recording. I'm recording. Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. Oh, man. Wish I wasn't doing this live. I would start this whole entire thing over. Anyway, Tuesday. Happy first Tuesday of the new year. Happy New Year. And I can't believe we've already been doing this for half a year. It's absolutely wild to me. Or next week is half a year. Anyway, here we are. Chapter 19, Dust to Dust. And it starts with this picture of this curly-haired goblin person with a plate of steaming something. Very descriptive. Rictus was waiting at the top of the stairs. His smile was sweet. His words were not. "You're a murderer now, my little man," he said. "Do you like the feel of Mars' blood on your hands?" "He didn't kill her," Mrs. Griffin said. "She was never alive. None of you are." "What are we, then?" Rictus asked. "Illusions," Harvey replied, ushering Mrs. Griffin and her cat past Rictus to the front door. "It's all illusions." Rictus followed them, giggling insanely. "What's so funny?" Harvey said, opening the door to let Mrs. Griffin out into the sun. "You are," Rictus replied. "You think you know everything, but you don't know Mr. Hood." "I will in a little while," said Harvey. "Go and get warm," he told Mrs. Griffin. "I'll be back." "Be careful, child," she said. "I will," he told her, then closed the door. "You're a strange one," Rictus said, his smile failing a little. His face, when his teeth was like a mask made of dough, 2 thumb holes for eyes and a blob for a nose. "I could suck out your brains through your ears," he said, all the music gone from his voice. "Maybe you could," said Harvey, "but you're not going to." "How do you know?" "Because I've got an appointment with your master." He started toward the bottom of the stairs, but before he reached it, a dark figure flitted in front of him. It was Jive, and he was carrying a plate of apple pie and ice cream. "It's a long climb," he said. "Put something in your stomach first." Harvey looked down at the plate. The pie was golden brown and dusted with sugar, the ice cream melting in a sweet white pool. It certainly looked tempting. "Go on," said Jive. "You deserve a treat." "No thanks," Harvey told him. "Why not?" Jive wanted to know, turning full circle on his heel. "It's lighter than I am." "But I know what it's made of," Harvey said. "Apples, cinnamon, and—" "No," said Harvey. "I know what it's really made of." He looked back at the pie, and for a moment it seemed he glimpsed the truth of the thing, the gray dust and ashes from which this illusion was made. "You think it's poisoned?" Jive said. "Is that it?" "Maybe," Harvey replied, still staring at the pie. "Well, it's not," Jive said, "and I'll prove it." Harvey heard Rictus make a warning sound behind him, but Jive didn't catch it. He plunged his fingers into the pie and ice cream and delivered them to his mouth in one swift motion. As he closed his mouth, Rictus said, "Don't swallow it!" Again, too late. The food went down in one gulp. An instant later, Jive dropped the plate and began to slam his fists against his stomach as if to force the food up again. But instead of half-chewed pie, a cloud of dust issued from between his teeth. Then another, and another. Half blinded, Jive snatched at Harvey's throat. "What You done? Harvey had no difficulty shaking himself free. It's all dust, he said. Dirt and dust and ashes. All the food, all the presents, everything. And here's this picture of Jive's mouth with a cloud of ashes coming out of it. Help me, Jive said, clawing at his mouth. Somebody, help me. There's no help for you now, came a solemn voice. Harvey looked around. It was Rictus who had spoken, and he was retreating across the hallway, his hands clamped to his face. He stared at Jive between his fingers, his teeth chattering as he voiced the horrid truth. You shouldn't have eaten that pie, he said. It's reminding your belly of what you're made of. What's that? Jive said. What the boy says, Rictus replied. Dirt and ashes. Jive threw back his head, howling, no, at this. But even as he opened his mouth to deny it, the truth came pouring forth, dry streams of dust that ran from his gullet and flowed over his fingers. It was like a fatal message being passed from one part of his body to another. Touched by the dust, his fingers began to crumble in their turn, and as they dropped, the same whisper of decay spread to his thighs and knees and feet. See, he even wrote, no! He started to drop to the ground, but with a final pirouette, swung himself around and grabbed hold of the banister. Save me! He yelled up the stairs. Mr. Hood! Can you hear me? Please! Please! Save me! His legs crumbled beneath him now, but he refused to give up. He started to haul himself up the stairs, still yelling for Mr. Hood to heal him. There was no reply from the heights of the house, however, nor any sound now from Rictus. There were only Jive's pleas and wheezings and the hiss of dust as it ran away down the stairs from the emptying sack of his body. What's going on? Wendell said, appearing from the kitchen with ketchup smeared down his mouth. He stared at the cloud of dust that hung around the stairs, unable to see the creature at its heart. Harvey was closer to the cloud, however, and so was witness to Jive's last terrible moments. The dying creature reached up with an almost fingerless hand, still hoping, even as its life drifted away, that its creator would come to save it. Then it sank down upon the stairs, and its last pitiful fragments crumbled. Somebody's been beating the carpets, Wendell said, as Jive's dust settled. Two down, Harvey murmured to himself. What did you say? Wendell wanted to know. Before he replied, Harvey glanced around the hallway, looking for Rictus, but Hood's third servant had disappeared. It doesn't matter, Harvey said. Are you done eating? Yeah. Was the food good? Yeah, Wendell grinned. Harvey shook his head. What does that mean? Wendell asked. Harvey was on the verge of saying, It means you can't help me. It means I have to go up and face Mr. Hood on my own. But what was the use? The house had claimed Wendell entirely. He'd be more of a hindrance than help in the battle ahead. So instead he said, Mrs. Griffin's outside. So we found her? Yeah, we found her. I'll go say hi, Wendell said with a cheery smile. Good idea. Wendell had his hand on the door when he turned and said, Where will you be? But Harvey didn't answer. He already climbed past the heap of dust that marked Jive's demise and was nearing the top of the first flight on his way to meet the power that lay waiting in the darkness of the attic. Chapter 20. The Thieves Meet. And here we have this reptilian type eyeball. Oops, it's the eye of Sauron. Glimpsing the dusty truth masquerading as pie and ice cream was one thing. But scratching the veneer of deceits that the house had polished to such perfection was quite another. As Harvey climbed the stairs, he kept hoping he'd find some little detail in the walls or the carpets that would allow him to get his mind's fingers beneath the lid of this illusion and lift it up to see what charmless thing lay inside. If Mar had been made of stale mud and spittle and jive of dust, what was the house itself made of? But it knew its business too well. However hard Harvey stared, he could not pierce its lies. It delighted his senses with warmth and color and the sense of summer. It cooed softly in his ear and played its gentle airs against his face. Even when he reached the dark landing at the top of the final flight, the house continued to pretend that this was just another innocent game of hide and seek, like the countless games it had seen played in its shadow. There were 5 doors ahead of him, every one of them ajar a few inches as if to say, "There are no secrets here, not from a boy who wants the truth. Come look. Come see, if you dare." He dared, but not in the way the house had planned. After spending a few moments examining the doors, he ignored all of them, and instead went back down a flight, chose a strong chair from one of the bedrooms, brought it back upstairs, climbed onto it, and pushed open the trapdoor that led onto the attic. It was hard work hauling himself up, but he knew, when he'd finished and lay panting on the attic floor, that his pursuit of Hood was almost at an end. The vampire king was near. Who else but a master of illusions would live in a place so bereft of them? The attic was all the house was not: filthy, murky, and cobwebbed. "Where are you?" he said. It was no use thinking he could surprise the enemy. Hood had watched his ascent from the first stair. "Come out," he yelled. "I want to see what a thief looks like." There was no reply at first, but then, from somewhere at the other end of the attic, Harvey heard a low, guttural growl. Not waiting for his eyes to become fully accustomed to the gloom, he started toward the utterance, the boards creaking beneath his feet as he went. Twice he stopped to look up, because a noise somewhere in the darkness overhead caught his attention. Was it a trapped bird, panicking as it flew blindly back and forth? Or roaches, perhaps, massed on the beams above him? He told himself to put such imaginings out of his head and concentrate on finding Hood. There were enough real reasons to be fearful here without inventing more. Unlike the area around the trapdoor, this end of the attic served as some kind of storeroom, and his enemy was surely lurking in the maze of rotting pictures and mildewed furniture. In fact, wasn't that a fluttering motion he saw now out of the corner of his eye? "Hood," he said, squinting to try and make better sense of the shape in the shadows. "What are you doing hiding up here?" He took another step forward, and as he did so, he realized his error. This wasn't the mysterious Mr. Hood. He knew this shape, mangled though it was, the half-rotted wings, the tiny black eyes, the teeth, the endless teeth. It was Karna. Perhaps I should have said that more interestingly. It was Karna. The creature half rose from its squalid nest, snapping at Harvey as it did so. It made a stumbling retreat and might have been seized after 3 steps had Karna had not been so hobbled by its wounds and slowed by the chaos of its surroundings. It struck out at the piles of detritus to the left and right of it, scattering chairs and overturning boxes, then hauled itself in pained pursuit of its prey. Harvey kept his eyes fixed upon the beast as he backed away, his mind buzzing with questions. Where was Hood? That was the main mystery. Mrs. Griffin had been certain he was up here somewhere, but Harvey had now wandered the attic from end to end, and its only occupant was the creature driving him back toward the exit. He chanced several glances into the shadows as he retreated, in case he'd missed some figure hiding there. It was not a human from his eyes alighted upon. However, it was a globe the size of a tennis ball, glowing as though filled with starlight. It appeared like a bubble from the boards and rose toward the roof. Momentarily forgetting his jeopardy, Harvey watched it as it ascended, joined by another, then a third, and a fourth. Astonished by the sight, he took too little care where he was walking. He stumbled, fell, and ended up sprawled on the hard boards, staring up at the roof through a red haze of pain. And there above him was Hood in all his glory. His face was spread over the entire roof, his features horribly distorted. His eyes were dark pits gouged into the timbers. His nose was flared and flattened grotesquely like the nose of an enormous bat. His mouth was a lipless slit that was surely 10 feet wide, from which issued a voice that was like the creaking of doors and the howling of chimneys and the rattling of windows. "Child," he said, "you have brought pain into my paradise. Shame on you." "What pain?" Harvey shouted back. He was shuddering to his marrow, but he knew this was no time to show his fear. He would deal in illusion, the way the enemy did, pretending courage, even if he didn't feel it. "I came to get what was mine, that's all," he said. Hood sucked one of the gleaming spheres into his mouth. Its light went out instantly. "Mar is dead," he said. "Jive is dead, gone to musk and dust because of you." I need to hydrate. "No," Harvey said. "Oh. They were never alive." "Did you not hear their sobs and pleas?" Hood demanded, the knots in his brow tightening. "Did you not pity them?" "No," Harvey said. "Then I will not pity you," came the rasping reply. "I will watch my poor Karna devour you from soul to scalp and take pleasure in it." Harvey glanced in Karna's direction. The beast had stopped advancing but was poised to strike, its dripping jaws inches from Harvey's feet. Now that the beast was still, he could clearly see how badly wounded it was, its body as ragged as a moldy rug, its huge head drooping as though every breath was a burden. As Harvey stared at it, he remembered something Mrs. Griffin had told him. "I would welcome death now," she said, "like a friend I'd driven from my door." Maybe it wasn't a journey to the stars that was awaiting Karna. Maybe it was simply a return to the nothingness from which Hood had conjured it. But the creature wanted that gift nevertheless. It was weary and wounded. Kept alive, not by any will of its own, but because Hood demanded its service. "Such a pity," the voice in the roof murmured. "What is?" Harvey said, looking back at Hood, who had 2 more of the globes at his lips. "To lose you this way," he went on. Can't I persuade you to think again? After all, I've done you no harm. Why not come back and live here peacefully? You stole 30 years of time with my mom and dad from me, Harvey said. If I stay here, you'll steal a lot more. I only took the days you didn't want, Hood protested. The rainy days, the gray days, the days you wished away. Where's the crime in that? I didn't know what I was losing, Harvey protested. Ah, said Hood softly, but isn't that the way of it? Things slip from your fingers, and when they're gone, you regret it. But gone is gone, Harvey Swick. No, Harvey said. What you stole, I can steal back. At this, a gleam ignited in the twin pits of Hood's eyes. You burn bright, Harvey Swick, he said. I've never known a soul that burned as bright as yours. He frowned as if studying the boy below. Now I understand, he said. Understand what? Why it is you came back. Harvey began to say, I came for what you took, but Hood was correcting him before he'd uttered 2 words. You came because you knew you'd find a home here, Hood said. We're both thieves, Harvey Swick. I take time. You take lives. But in the end, we're both the same. Both thieves of always. Repulsive as it was to think of himself in any way similar to this monster, there was some corner of Harvey that feared this was true. The thought silenced him. Perhaps we needn't be enemies, Hood said. Perhaps I should take you under my wing. My west wing. He laughed mirthlessly at his own joke. How do you laugh in a whisper? I can nurture you, help you better understand the dark paths. So I'll end up feeding on children like you? Harvey said. No thanks. I think you'd like it, Harvey Swick, Hood said. You've got a streak of the vampire in you already. There was no denying this. The very word vampire reminded him of his Halloween flight, of soaring against a harvest moon, with his eyes burning red and his teeth as sharp as razors. "I see you remember," Hood said, catching the flicker of pleasure on Harvey's face. Harvey instantly put a scowl in its place. "I don't want to stay here," he said. "I just want to get what's mine and leave." Hood sighed. "So sad," he said. "So very sad. But if you will have what's yours, have death. Karna." The beast raised its pitiful head. "Devour the boy." Before the wretched beast could shift itself, Harvey scrambled to his feet. In the race to the trapdoor, he knew he had little chance of outrunning Karna, but was there perhaps another way of laying the beast low? If he was a thief of all ways, as Hood had said, perhaps it was time to prove it. Not with dust, nor with stolen conjurings, but with the power in his own bones. Karna took a threatening step toward him, but instead of retreating, Harvey extended his hand in the creature's direction, as if to pat its decaying head. It hesitated, its expression mellowing into doubt. "Devour him," the Vampire King growled. The beast lowered its head in expectation of punishment from above, but it was Harvey who laid his hand upon it, a gentle touch that sent a shudder through its body. It raised its snout to press itself against Harvey's palm. And as it did so, it let out a long, low moan. There was neither pain in the sound nor complaint. In fact, it was almost a moan of gratitude. That for once it not be met with blows or with howls of horror. Woo! It turned its eyes up to Harvey's face, and a shudder of pleasure passed through its body. It seemed to know that the motion would prove fatal, because the instant after, it retreated from its comforter, and as it did so, its shudders multiplied, and its body suddenly flew into 1,000 pieces. Its teeth, which had seemed so fearsome moments before, rolled away into the darkness. Its massive skull shattered. Its spine collapsed. In a matter of seconds, it was no more than a heap of bone shards, so dry and so aged, even the most desperate dog would have passed them by. Harvey glanced up at the face in the roof. Hood's expression was one of utter perplexity. His mouth was agape, his eyes staring from their pits. Harvey didn't wait for him to break his silence. He simply turned his back on Karna's remains and hurried toward the trapdoor, half expecting the creature in the roof to slam it shut. There was no response from Hood, however, until Harvey was lowering himself down onto the chair on the landing. Only then, as Harvey took one last look up at the attic, did Hood speak. "Oh, my little thief," he murmured. "What shall we do with you now?" And that, my friends, concludes chapter 20 and this evening's reading. And I believe that next week might be the end, or actually it looks kind of long, so I think we might have 2 more parts.
Thank you very much for being here, and I am looking forward to next Tuesday's Tales of Terror. And of course, as always, stay spooky. It's my special modified heart sending you peace, sending you love, and stay weird.